A warm welcome to this installment of the E-Lounge. Today, we speak to the greatest boardroom dancer and corporate activist of our time, Ms Nolitha Fakude, author of a memoir, Boardroom Dancing, Transformation Stories from a Corporate Activist. Born in the Eastern Cape and having learned her business acumen at her mother's general store, she has gone on to make strides in various boardrooms and transforming every space she has ever stepped in. Nolitha has led from the front and has not been shy to tackle the tough business issues that business has to deal with, including policy reform to enable inclusive economic growth. In her words, Ms. Fakude's aim for writing this book is to invoke deeper discussions about what our shared future should look like and what the common values of South Africa should be. Boardroom Dancing is a memoir that takes us through Nolitha's life and how her own privilege invoked a deep sense of compassion and kindness towards others, a trait that those that she has led have benefited greatly from. A distinguished leader, Ms. Fakude holds a bachelor's degree honors in psychology from the University of Fort Hare and completed the senior executive program at Harvard Business School in the United States. Nolitha's current leadership roles include chairman of Anglo-American's Management Board in South Africa, and she also sits on the Anglo-American Platinum Board as a non-executive director. She's the president of the Minerals Councils of South Africa. She's a non-executive director of the JSE Limited and vice president of the International Women's Forum of South Africa. She also serves as a member of the Council of Elders and is a respected authority on transformation and empowerment in South Africa. She has held executive senior positions in various industries and sectors, including retail, financial services, mining and oil and gas, which includes executive director and vice president of strategy and sustainability at Sasol Limited, the president of Black Management Forum from 2003 to 2006, and also its managing director between 2000 and 2003. She was also on the board of Anglo-American PLC from 2017 to 2019. She was the deputy chair and lead independence director of Datacentrics Holdings Limited. She was the chairperson of Sasol Mining and as a non-executive director of Harmony Gold Mines, Woolworths, and Discovery Banks, just to mention a few. Her accolades include the 2004 Most Influential Businesswoman by Financial Mail, Impala Platinum Young Entrepreneur Award, and the National Honor by the Golden Key Society of University of Johannesburg. The E-Lounge is one of our knowledge share platforms. We do hope that you will tune in, take away the knowledge, and remember that those who deserve to lead should read.
A very warm welcome to the E-Lounge, the Gautrain Management Agency's book club, our knowledge share platform. In the studio, we have Ms Nolitha Fakude, Omam Gebe. Ms Nolitha, welcome to the E-Lounge.
Thank you very much, Viwe. Good day, and thank you again for inviting me to join you to the part of your discussion as part of the Gautrain E-Lounge conversations.
Absolutely, it's an absolute honor. We're discussing your book today, Boardroom Dancing, aptly named Boardroom Dancing. But before we get into that, we are hot off Women's Month in August, and I just want us to start with acknowledging the women. First of all, you, as you sit here, as one of the pioneering women in our country, but also the three women that have shaped who you are. As I read your book, I come up with three. Umangangenkomo, umakhulu. Your mother, umanjoli, Mambele. And thirdly, Mama Winnie Mandela. So I would like you to just speak a little bit about these women and the role they played in your life. What is the legacy and what are the lessons that you've learned from them?
Indeed, Viwe, as I always say to people, I come from a village where mostly the visible people in that village were women, because the men were unfortunately either working in Gauteng, those days it used to be working in the gold mines, or they were working in Cape Town in the docks. And so the people who were in the village, who held the village together, were the mothers, were the grandmothers, and other women. And in my family, my grandmother, Umangange Nkomo, who was the matriarch of the family, basically is the one who was the source of how we worked in the family. She owned a general dealer shop. She was an entrepreneur. She's a woman way ahead of her times who in the early 60s was already a businesswoman. And therefore, through her and her mentoring my mother, who was her daughter-in-law, Unodu Monjoli, we got to be a family of traders and entrepreneurs. And for me, the fact that I grew up in an environment where women were visible, were leading, and also were in charge of their lives always gave me a sense of knowing that that's what I was expected to do. The great gift that I received when I was 30 years old was to meet up with Umama Winnie Mandela.
Yes.
And when I talk about meeting with her in 1994, she was brought into our lives by a friend when we were in Cape Town, living in Cape Town in 1994. This is when Parliament was opening up. And she was meant to visit for 3 days, but she ended up staying for almost like 5 months. And that was a gift because I got to see not only someone who was an icon in our lives and in my mother's life and generation, but to be with her and experience her as a leader, because she was a deputy minister at the time, but also as a mother and also a community builder. So for me, in acknowledgement of Women's Month, those 3 women represent a lot of what other women in our society are all about.
Yes, thank you for that, Ms Nolitha. And you mentioned the entrepreneurial spirit of your grandmother, which also, is visible in your own mother. And then with Mamuini being a community builder, as you've said. The interesting thing in your book, you mention even in your childhood, how you spent lots of time in your mother's shop, how you spent quiet times, as it were, if you want to escape it all, in your grandmother's church, sweeping the church. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, how did you grow up, and just sharing those experiences with us.
Yeah, so I always say to people, I started working when I was 8 years old.
Isn't that child labor in today's times?
In today's times, I think my mom would have been really in serious trouble.
Violation of Child Act.
So, and the circumstances around that was the fact that my mother was widowed quite early. She was 28 years herself, a child in many respects. And by that time, when she was widowed, even my grandmother had passed away already. So she inherited the general dealer shop, and she was also a teacher at the same time. And as the firstborn child in the family, I was kind of expected to support her, and I stepped in as second in command, as I always say.
Deputy
because,
parent.
I became the deputy parent at 8 years old. I would work in the shop before going to school, for example.
Yes.
I would have to go to the shop to open up for the bakery, which used to arrive at 5 a.m. in the morning before they delivered bread in town. So they would come to the village, deliver bread, and my mother would catch a lift with a bakery to go to town because she wanted to go to the fruit and vegetable market to buy stuff and come back early enough for her to be on time to start with school at 8 o'clock as a teacher and for me to go to school. And the lady was working in the shop would come in to relieve me so that I could prepare to go to school. So when I say truly I worked, I started working when I was 8 years old. That's the kind of responsibility I had as a child. And in our family, my mother, because of those circumstances, made it clear that everyone had a role to play in making sure that we kept the family afloat.
Yes.
And also we didn't get a situation where things fell apart just because the husband was not there or any other support in the family. That shaped me in terms of the hard work and tenacity part of my, what I refer to as my DNA. But one area that for me has always stood out when I reflect about my childhood is the fact that my mother taught me about social solidarity. Because in the village, as we always say, it takes a village to raise a child. And in my sense, I truly was raised by a village. Everyone within the small village was your parent. Everyone in the village knew your business. Whether you liked it or not, they knew whose child you belonged to, and if you misbehaved, they will tell your parent.
Yes.
And also because we had a shop at home, obviously that was almost like a community center. So people would come in and out of the village. And my mother's ethos was, just because you do not have money to pay for your food or to pay for family burial or difficulty that we had, it didn't mean that she couldn't help. Yes. So she supported people, as she would put it. You can't have a situation where we were the only ones who had, whilst the rest of the people around us didn't have.
Yes.
So that is the social solidarity, which today we call Ubuntu, because I think as Africans, that is a core value that has shaped me and shaped all of us to know that umntu ngumntu ngabantu.
Yes, yes, absolutely, Sister Nolitha. So there is a part in the book where you speak about how, and you allude to it even now, how you were privileged as a family and how you were also privileged as a child and how you felt the privilege. But your ethos towards how you interact with people and how you support people, to what extent did your teachings from your mother, as you said, shaped who you became, even though you were coming from a family that is privileged to a certain extent?
You know, today, when we talk about privilege, and I mean, for those who don't know, I was born in the 60s. So for me, in the 60s, the definition of privilege and the privilege today is completely different.
Yes.
But the essence of privilege means that you've got access. The fact that you and I today are sitting here and having access to people and being able to influence people's views and engage with them, that's a position of privilege.
Yes.
And so when I talk about the privilege that I felt as a child that we had, the fact that we had economically, that was a source of privilege. But also the fact that with that privilege came the responsibility that says you cannot have alone without sharing with others. That's part of what we seem to lose and miss as we talk about how do we make an impact in people's lives and also how we engage with society. And I believe that all of us as leaders, as managers, as people who have had the benefit of an education or who are able to be in positions of influence, that's a position of privilege because we've got access. How you use that position is the most important thing. When you are a leader, the question is, are you using that position to better the lives of other people? Are you using that position to make sure that others who are not there represented do feel represented? And that's the ethos that I always use to say, be the voice of those not sitting at the table.
It's interesting how you mention the voice of those that are not with you, that you may want to represent, because on page 40 of the book, you speak about a scenario where you and your Woolies newly appointed colleagues were sort of I'd say the black interns in that cohort. Information was hidden. I remember there was a trip, if I recall, in the book, and this information went to the white colleagues. It didn't go to the black colleagues, and you decided to say something. So my question was, as I was reading, what is this voice where does it come from, this speaking for those who are voiceless? Because there were many of you in that cohort, and you are the one who confronted the HR department and asked about this.
Well, that was 33 years ago. I was younger, I was braver.
Yes.
And more importantly, you know, the sense of always feeling that in life, when you talk about having fairness, justice, and equality, it's something that I take seriously. It's something that I always brought with me wherever I was. And within Woolworths as a company, and it's something we all have in the various organizations we're part of, its values.
Yeah.
You know, in company values, we talk about what our values stand for, what our values do to shape the culture of our organizations. And one of the values at the time for the company Woolworths that I was working for was the value of diversity, that the company wanted to include those who were excluded. And again, because we're coming in at the time, this was 1990. You can imagine pre-1994,
Absolutely.
how that environment looked like. There were people who were not necessarily agreeing with what the company was doing, but they worked for the company, but they would then sabotage what the company was trying to do.
Yeah.
So when you see that it's not fair, what was being done, and also understanding that your own performance at the end of the day is going to be evaluated on whether you were part of a particular process or not. For me, that was the unfair part. Hence, I asked the question when I realized that we had been left out as the black trainees, and said, but how come we were left out when we were told that the trip was no longer going to take place?
Yes.
So it's, I would say it's truly that voice that says, you know what, if something is not fair, if it's not also not explained in terms of why are we doing what we're doing or not doing what we're meant to be doing, then it's up to us to challenge the leaders who have put up the values in the companies and the organizations we're part of, to say, why are you not living the values that we espouse for? Yeah. And now as a leader, and you as a leader, I'm sure you get challenged every day yourself by people who say, but you're not living the values that we have said we all are espousing in this organization. Yes. So for me, it's always been one of those that says, you know what is the framework that we live in within this particular environment, whether it's an organization, institution, church, school, or any other environment, including home. There are values that govern how you as people in that space operate. And those values often fundamentally anchor who you are, what you believe in, and also how you engage with the world.
Then, you know, in speaking for the voiceless, there is a manner in which you do it. As we read the book, what one is finding is that you are holding these very tough conversations in scenarios where you are deliberately excluded from board packs in meetings. It's not prepared for you. And your mentor or sponsor in those meetings is giving you advice on how to handle them. Can you, just a small, not even a masterclass, like a small snippet of teaching us what are the tools as women we should have in addressing or speaking truth to power, and also holding the tough conversations without being labeled as, you know, often people will say women are so emotional and all of that stuff. What tools can you leave us with in having tough conversations, speaking truth to power, but living with dignity at the same time?
So I'm pleased that you're asking that question in terms of, you know, what are the critical factors that one should look at. But as we talk about them, I think they also apply to men.
Okay.
And I always say I feel sorry for the generation of today that has got quick fixes of drafting an email and sending it without reflecting on it. Yeah. So one of the tools that one has got to have as a leader and as a person you should be reflective as a person. And to be reflective, it means you listen. So I always say the value and the principle of listening and seeking first to understand in order to be understood is very important. It's very tempting to want to respond to someone before you even understand why are they doing what they are doing and understanding what's driving them, because by understanding that you can respond much better and much more effectively, I believe, over the years. And secondly, when you seek first to understand in order to be understood, when you respond, then you are not going to miss in terms of making sure that your message goes through, because now you can be factual and also you can be less unsure about what happened, because more often than not, something happens and you say, that didn't feel or sound right. And in this instance, for instance, the colleague comes into the meeting, hands out the packs to everybody else except me.
Yes.
So the first meeting I thought, well, I'm sure it's because I'm new, so that's why he's one short. So I couldn't say anything. The colleague next to me said, no, we can share our pack. And so that was the first meeting. The next meeting, this happens again, and this time around he deliberately skips me and hands over to everybody else, and I realize that this is deliberate.
Yes.
So now I'm no longer giving him excuses, but I'm realizing that truly his intention is to exclude me. And as you can imagine, I never listened to the rest of the meeting because my head and brain and mouth, I was holding myself, trying not to say anything, but truly taken aback by what was happening. And because these were weekly meetings, so the next week I knew that he was going to come and do the same thing, because now I had established that there was intention to exclude me. And I had prepared my own response in a way that I knew that when I respond, I was not going to be the one who would be labeled as being hysterical or unreasonable or just disruptive.
Yes.
So when it happened again, because human nature, people follow through their behavior, repeat things that they get away with. So they came and did the same thing. This time around, I said to the chair of the meeting, excuse me, I don't know why I'm not getting a copy, because it looks like Mr. So-and-so doesn't want me to see what's in these documents. And I thought I was part of this team. And the chair was very good, quickly picked up, because he was also my mentor. He said, well, Mr. So-and-so, can you please go out and make photocopies for Ms. Fakude so that she can participate in the meeting whilst we move to the other agenda item.
Yes.
And so the issue was less about me, but now more about him and his behavior. And that is how you want to work on situation. And obviously, that's an example of a longer process where you are already aware that I'm in a space where I'm not even expected to be here.
Yes.
Some people don't even want me to be in this space, but I'm going to make sure that when I'm there, I present myself the way I want to be treated, with dignity, with respect, and more importantly, I will treat others the same. And that's a choice that I make. And there are times where the response may not be so long. You may do it immediately, but I always say choose your battles.
Good advice, good advice. On the issue of intention, I think the colleague had obviously bad intentions there, but I want to speak about intention and just reflect a bit about the way you wrote about intention in the book. So at Woolies, Sasol, BMF, I want to read a portion from page 101 when you took over as the MD at BMF. You say here, the second last paragraph, or in fact the last paragraph, my vision for my tenure as MD was twofold. One, to strengthen our operations and to build more effective membership-oriented organization, and two, to support BMF President Bheki Sibiya's agenda to reaffirm our organization's relevance by aligning our continued development of Black managerial leadership with the implementation of the transformation laws that were unfolding. Then you also carry on in terms of, on an operational perspective, financing and reinforcing the policies and so on. This is just one example where you move into a role, you've got intent, you have a vision for the role. Where at Woolies, you even say that was your university of retail. At Sasol, a school for testing, business school, your true north was at the BMF. Just share with us your philosophy around intention as human beings, as leaders, and also as women leaders. What's the role of intention, and why do you do what you do, the way you do it?
Yeah, so again, when I started working 33 years ago, I didn't have much intention. My big intention was to get a job, put food on the table,
yes,
make sure that I was able to look after myself and my family. And that's often all of our intentions when we start working. I say as human beings, we have three intentions in terms of fulfillment and self-actualization. One, you want to be able to earn a living in a way that is credible and in a way that will make sense, and also the fact that you want fairness and equality. So money is important. And secondly, meaning. You want a meaning behind the job. So why am I doing the job that I'm doing every day? How am I making a difference in terms of the role that I play? How is my job in this company and organization connected to the rest of how the organization gets to get the trains going? What is my job in the company contributing towards the trains running on time? That's meaning.
Yes.
And also you have your own personal meaning where you feel, at the end of the day, we've been able to meet our goals as a company. That gives you meaning.
Yes.
And the third part is around purpose. And purpose, it's more external, where you say, what, my purpose in life, why was I brought into this world? Why was I born? And how do I then make my purpose part of my work, if possible, and where possible? And more importantly, how do I use purpose to impact society at large? And often people confuse the issue of meaning and purpose. You think at work, I'm going to also have purpose. It's not every day that you are fortunate enough that your work gives you the same purpose as your life values or your wishes. So between making money, that is getting the job, meaning, and purpose to get impact. For me, it's a lesson I only learned 10 years into my career.
Okay.
So as I say, I started working, you want a job, you want to be able to
earn
and put money on the table.
Yeah.
But then you realize, how do I do this? Where's the meaning? And I was fortunate that within Woolworths as a company, because of the values of the organization and also the roles that I had in the company, where I was responsible for corporate affairs and social responsibility, I could already connect meaning in terms of what I did and what the company did and what the company enabled me to do to support communities and make a difference. I was able to connect that very much closely. And then obviously the purpose and the impact. What impact were we having as an organization throughout society? And so when I say 10 years, literally I was with Woolworths for 11 years. So over that 10 years, I realized then that the power of moving into roles where there is an alignment between your own personal vision and that of the company, or at least the values of the company and your own values, is important. Because when you join a company, all you know is that you are joining Department X, but you see the values of what the companies are.
Yes.
Because they often are in the website.
Yes.
And also the leaders of that organization, you either know what they stand for as individuals or you see how they lead. And you then say there's something that resonates between my own values and what this company stands for, and therefore I can work for this company or I can work for this organization because the values are resonating.
Yeah.
And then so I had therefore the opportunity to be able to say, when opportunities or jobs come my way, is this the kind of company I want to work for? Are these the kind of people I want to be linked up with? Or is this the kind of organization that when you ask, who do you work for? You mumble. There are organizations that will say, and want to know, why are you not talking proudly about your organization or your employer? And it's because as employers and as leaders, we are not living the values that make everybody feel, I'm so proud to be associated with this company. I'm so proud to be associated with this department. And therefore, when they are asked who do they work for, they say it with pride rather than mumble. So those are the challenges, I believe, that as leaders, we have to make sure that as you continue not only planning your career or planning how you will work through your life cycle, you also consciously say, I need to be associated with institutions, with organizations, with departments that really I can stand proud and say, in my CV, I don't have one that I want to be deleting because I don't want to be associated with purely because either of values or even part of how they operate.
So our role as leaders goes beyond just we are leading the organization, but the essence of living the values has got much ripple effects.
Huge. And viewer, for instance, we often know that when people leave an organization and they resign, sometimes 90% of the time people leave their boss.
True.
They are not leaving the organization per se. Someone will say, I really like the organization. I like everybody else except for my boss. So people leave leaders. They don't leave the organization. So as leaders, we need to live the values that our organizations espouse for, so that people want to be part of that organization. And obviously the culture that leaders create in the organization make it more attractive for you as an organization to attract people into your organization and also retain them.
It's interesting, we were discussing earlier that the late Mama Doris Toyle, she had, I would say, partnership with Woolworths for quite a while. And in one of the interviews, she mentions how she felt that there was a high level of respect and humanity in that organization that she hadn't seen before, from the lowest level person to the highest paid person. So, which to me, speaks to what you've said now about the values and the importance of values in an organization. And you really speak about this in your book. And I wanted to bring in the issue of values, culture transformation. You spent quite, I'd say, a number of years in your career being a change maker. Some people actually refer to you as a leader who is a change maker. Your tenure at Sasol speaks for itself. Just share with us your philosophy again around what brings about transformation in organizations. What kind of tools must leaders have in order to bring about lasting, impactful, values-based transformation in organizations, whether these organizations are in the private sector or in the public sector?
Yeah, so the whole issue around organizations setting themselves up to be able to transform, not only in the narrow sense where you say you are transforming from a race and gender perspective, because that's a South African notion, but just globally, when we talk about transformation of organizations, we are talking about organizations that are always setting themselves up to be agile, that are always setting themselves up to be able to operate in any environment, and also that are inclusive in terms of decision making, that are engaged with their stakeholders, whether it's internal or external. And so over the years, and when I start also even talking about the strategies that we applied at Sasol when we looked at the transformation journey with the CEO, for me the key issue first was whether the CEO and the rest of the ExCo team had bought into the idea of change and transformation.
Yes.
And that was a conversation that we had for a long time before even getting to a point of alignment amongst ourselves, because it was important that we understand what the values of the organization meant and what those values were going to be used for in terms of anchoring our strategy as an organization. So the strategy of the organization was a strategy for growth into the continent at the time. We were in Qatar, in the Middle East, we were in Mozambique, in SADC, and we're looking for other areas to grow and develop in. So the issue of not only being able to access those markets, but also able to access them in a way that we were partners with those governments and the countries where we operated was important. But we needed to first practice at home. Yes. Charity begins at home. So we needed to be sure that our organization, the values that we were talking about were values that we as leaders could stand and say, these anchor us and we're going to espouse to lead. So linked to the values is the culture.
Yes.
So in the book, I talk about the conversations we used to have at Sasol around how do you connect the head and the heart to the hands.
Yes.
Because that's how your transformation and change happens. You know conceptually that I have to change. So the head, you tell yourself that, I have to change. What's the business case for change? What's the driver for this change? You all agree and buy into it. And then you've got to change the heart, because the heart, it's also about your behavior.
Yes.
The fact that you have to unlearn certain things that you previously did, or learn new ways of doing things. And the values talk to the heart. And then the culture part, it's how then the head and the heart, when they are connected, then you deliver. And delivery, it's about the hands. It's also the how. So the head is about the what, and the values is the how, and the culture is the how. So you may be right in your strategy, but how you are delivering, how people experience your organization or you as an individual, it's about the culture, it's about the values. Are they experiencing you the same way that you say your values stand for? So if you stand for integrity as one of your values, let's say in an organization, do the leaders practice integrity in a way that is consistent? And integrity in a consistent way, it's not only about saying integrity in terms of, we don't want corruption. It's about decision making. If I've made a commitment to you as my colleague that this is the agreement we have, then with integrity, I need to honor that.
Yes.
If I go to a partner, whether it's government or community or any other stakeholder, and we agree on something, including labor, the integrity that you deliver to that commitment should be consistent to the integrity value that you have as an organization. And how you promote people in the organization, who you promote. Do you promote people who live the values and the culture that we espouse for? Or do you promote people who are doing the opposite? Because if you are doing that, then you are not consistent with your values.
Yeah.
And so those were the conversations we would have within the organization at Sasol, which were championed by the CEO. Pat Davis was a champion for the program. And the program that we had, which was clearly about systemic changes in the organization. We knew we had to change the organization, all the systems, procedures, and processes that were built over time, which had created a particular culture that we needed to change towards another culture. And that's the one way you can get sustainability. Because then if you're changing the systems of the organization and processes to support your strategy and your vision of change and culture, you've got a better chance of sustaining those strategies than if you don't put in place programs and interventions in place. And obviously all of us, even today, when you look at organizations, we are still challenged by how, as organizations and leaders, we continue to say our strategies, our values and the culture are consistent. And how do we make sure that we pull this together? And the culture is the glue that pulls everything together. So if your culture is not in alignment with your values and your strategies, it's not going to fit. You'll say something and people say, yeah. You know,
no buy-in.
No buy-in because they don't see you living the values. And also, as we often say, you have to walk the talk.
Absolutely. So, head, heart, hands is your philosophy when it comes to change. I have lots of questions, but I'm going to move to questions from my colleagues so that I don't get into trouble with them. The first question from one of our colleagues is that you have a lot of experience as a women leader in boards locally and abroad. And her question was, how do you create space at those tables? How did you do it, creating spaces at those tables in the boards locally and abroad? And what lessons did you bring with from sitting in these various boards as a leader?
Yeah, so the question around creating space is an important question because it links very much to the point of saying, how do you become the voice of those not at the table?
Sure.
And you are not going to be the voice of those not at the table if you are not conscious or intentional about it. Or if you do not know what you stand for. Or if you are not clear about who you are as a person and the values that we espouse. So those are important foundations that you need as a person and as a leader to bring with you. And for me, I was fortunate in that I came from generations of leaders and organizations that sponsored me, that mentored me into the transformation agenda, like the Black Management Forum organization, for instance, where the fundamental value around change and transformation was important. So whichever boardroom I walked into, I knew that one of the key issues that I stand for, is transformation. Okay. And I would even ask the people when they invite me to join their boards, are you clear that you know what you are getting? Because when I'm coming in, I don't want to be having challenges around having to talk about this. So that's the one fundamental step, even as we talk about boardroom dancing. And the second one is the fact that as a woman and as a Black woman in South Africa, I knew that I stand on a mandate that comes from transformation. Were it not for employment equity, I would not be sitting on those boardroom tables. So from an employment equity perspective, I represent a mandate that is a much bigger mandate than a personal mandate. And therefore, the importance of asking the question, where are the Black people? Where are the women? Where are the people, the others who are different from us, to add diversity to this conversation? Where are those who will be able to give a different perspective? And whether we are in South Africa or any international board, diversity and inclusion is key and critical. So you actually use your voice as part of those discussions and conversations as appropriate to ask about diversity, even on issues when people come to present. People come to present to the board. And more often, by the time you get presentations that come to the board, you'll see 3 people, whereas you know that there may have been 5 or 10 people who were preparing this presentation, and they don't get the acknowledgement. And those who are not there we are not going to know about them. And then when it comes to promotion time and time to acknowledge people, some leaders don't necessarily say, "Oh, thanks to my team." They always say, "Thank you, thank you." So
I did all of this.
Yeah. So over time, you realize that you need to ask the question: where are the young people in this organization? How come when we get presentations, we don't see young people or we don't see diverse teams? And people soon learn to know that she's going to ask the question, so I better make sure my team comes in diverse and prepared. And obviously, you work through those processes.
Yeah. So the mandate is bigger than just you as a person, as you say. The other question, or the second question, is about sponsors in the workplace. So it's a two-pronged question. The first part of it is, how do we as leaders become self-appointed sponsors of those we work with? There are instances, it's predominantly women, who are very good in delivering and do the work, they're star performers, but may not be able to articulate themselves as well as they should. As a result, their introvertness overshadows what they do. So how do we as leaders recognize those kind of people and be the self-appointed sponsors for them? Is there such a thing as a self-appointed sponsor?
Definitely, there is something called self-appointed sponsor, and it's a role that each leader should have. So in organizations, and because I spent most of my time in HR, also with HR-related positions,
yes,
the issue around talent management is important. Because with talent management, we are able to understand what is the talent pipeline that we have in the organization. As I was talking about a team that comes to present, that initially may be a white male only team. When you ask the question, let me see within your division, what is the diversity pipeline? You may not have the people now today,
yes,
but who are the people that are in your succession plan? You have those conversations, and when you have them, then you hold accountable those leaders to developing the next layer of talent, so that there is clarity around when are we going to see the next VA come up. And so as leaders, that's how you sponsor a system, because I may not know all people in an organization with 40,000 employees. It's impossible. But if you have a system of talent management, if you've got a clear system of succession planning, and if you have those meetings and hold leaders accountable, you then will start seeing the talent come through. And one of the tools that we used at Sasol, for instance, which was very effective, was in our scorecard as leaders, right up to, I would say, the key top 50 employee leaders in the organization. In the scorecard, you had 15% of your short-term incentive, your bonus, linked to transformation. And not just transformation, it was Black economic empowerment and also values and talent management. So when you may score well on the other indicators, but if those key components are not where they're expected to be or where we had agreed on, then it means your bonus, whatever it is minus 15%. So when we hit people in the pocket,
that's where it hurts.
Then the conversations change very quickly. And it used to be quite interesting before we signed off bonuses and submitted them for ExCo discussions, the kind of one-on-one conversations I would have where you have the CEO or the MD of a division wanting to come and explain why they didn't meet the target, but we are just one short, but we have this. And then that's the time then you negotiate and you say, so if this year you're one short and you say you've done all these things, how about you do next year more in this area? How about you send 5 of your people on international programs? How about you do rotation, so that then you get commitment now for next year for development of people. And those were the times I always said to all my HR colleagues, that's the time you must actually put in tougher targets, because people are prepared to negotiate. And obviously
it's about money now.
You are hitting them where it counts. And so it's part of saying, I mean, we do these things as leaders for the right reasons, but you incentivize people for performance or non-performance. It can't be you give a commitment but you are not held accountable. So when people say, how do you hold people accountable? You're holding them accountable by penalizing them when they perform less, or by incentivizing them positively when they perform well.
That is a good, and performance management at all levels to drive the agenda. The other question I have for my colleagues is imposter syndrome. As a woman leader, have you experienced it? How have you overcome it, if you've ever experienced it? And what advice would you give to women leaders that have got battling with imposter syndrome?
Unfortunately, I have experienced imposter syndrome, and I have come to the conclusion that it's got nothing to do with women only, it's got everything to do with all of us as people. But women have more of that, especially when you come into spaces where visibly there are not a lot of other women in that space, or people who look like you. And the syndrome, hence it's called imposter, it's because you keep second guessing yourself and saying, oh, am I good enough to be here? Or am I living up to the expectations? Or am I ready for this role? And I always say, you know, every day for me, where, for instance, I have to do this interview with you or with any other person, I'm talking about a book that I wrote myself, but I'm sitting and thinking, oh my goodness, am I forgetting something? Was that interview good enough? You know, I could have said it differently. That's part of, those are the voices that get into your head all the time, and how to deal with it. I always say one of the key issues is to know your subject that you're going to be talking about. Prepare yourself as much as is possible, so that when you come into any situation or conversation, at least you know you are able to deliver what you can at the best way that you can. But over and above that, you may be very much prepared and you have all the qualifications and competencies, but as women, we always beat ourselves up for the 15% that we know we are not strong in, because no one is perfect.
Yes.
We will want to stick to the things and the areas that we know we are weak or challenged on, whereas men, they're 100% perfect, even when they are not. So that's where I say, you know, as women, we can do better by focusing on the areas of our strength and talk more about what you're stronger on. And then lastly, more importantly, always surround yourself with people that know more than you do or are smarter than you are, and be open enough to say, actually on this one, I'm going to defer to other people. I don't have all the answers. Then that way you create the confidence for yourself to be able to move on, even though you know you feel, for this one, I'm not sure if I'm doing the best that I could do.
Yeah, absolutely. There's two more questions from the colleagues. The one is, I think you've answered it to a great extent. Has the responsibility of assisting in the shop, I think, Kwangeka, not robbed you of being a child in any way? And how has it shaped you?
The Nceka experience and where we grew up, I think where the benefit for me came around being a child was the fact that all the other children in the village wanted to come and play with me in our yard. So I always had playmates, so it wasn't as bad as it sounds. it was always, I had friends around to play with. But from teaching you the value of hard work, it's got its downside, because over time I've driven myself harder sometimes than I should, because I'm kind of saying, well, there's no excuse. When you come from a culture and a framework where your mother tells you hard work never killed anyone, you forget that there's something called work-life balance. Eventually, there's never a work-life balance, there's work-life harmony, but you have to find ways to make sure that you give yourself space and time to have fun. And I do a lot of that. I'm conscious, I'm intentional about spending time with friends, with family, doing things that I love doing, so that I can try and have that balance. But it's something you have to learn and be intentional about.
Okay. We often hear of people who fought apartheid in the streets. So I think in the book we speak about Toi Toi. And the colleague is asking, how have you fought this in the boardroom, and are you still fighting it even today? Are you still engaged in a boardroom dancing, Toi Toi in those boardrooms? In a elegant way, she says, because it's a boardroom.
Yeah, obviously Toi Toi was the language we understood that you do on the streets. Behind closed doors in a boardroom, you have to find what's the dance at play, because it's also about the culture in that environment. And ballroom dancing, because it's elegant and because there are different dances, it's not just one dance. You can have cha-cha-cha, you can have the waltz, you can have jive, all sorts of different dances. It's different cultures. And you've got to come into that boardroom and understand what culture is at play, what style of leadership is happening at the time, because based on those situations, then you actually find a way that you navigate in the boardroom to still get to the vision and the goal that you seek to achieve. So for me, every day, it's about the meeting I'm having with whom, what's the culture, what are the drivers that the other person is seeking to achieve out of this conversation, and how do I help them meet those whilst also meeting my own commitments and drivers. So it's an ongoing dance. It's an ongoing navigation to make sure that you challenge for issues. And I often say, and I was saying this to someone this week, on a particular heated topic we were all going on about, I said, okay, on that point, I'm going to concede. I'm not going to die in the ditch for that one. But on this one, I'm sorry. I feel very strongly about, we'll need to have this discussion again, because it's agree to disagree. I won't agree with you on that one on a principle. So you have to, on an ongoing basis, as a leader, have things that you say, these are non-negotiables, and these I know I can be able to negotiate about.
There is a quote from the book. Throughout my life, you say, women have particularly embraced me in so many ways. Women I know and women I don't know. Nindenze umtu ngokwenene, umtu ngumtu ngabantu. That is straight from the book. I want you to just share with us a little bit about the women networks that you've been in, you've created, participated in. But what is the role of women supporting each other, and in demystifying this thing of women don't support each other and so on? You demonstrate in the book that in fact they do. In the book you even share with us your private moments where every weekend you were spending with your women circle, with your children and everyone, to have a space to breathe. Just share with us a bit about the importance of women as supportive networks.
Yeah, the solidarity of women when you open up to having that is important. And I have learned over the years that sometimes that solidarity may come from people that you didn't even think were thinking about you in that context. championing you, sponsoring you in your absence. And I come from a generation of leaders where we had very few black professionals in the country. So I knew about who the leaders were, or the senior women were in Deloitte.
Yes.
I knew who were the women in KPMG. I knew who were the women in retail, because South Africa is a small community. And we championed each other. And if anyone were to ask and say, do you know Viwe from Gautrain? I'll say yes, even if I don't know them. Then only thereafter go and find out who's Viwe, and vice versa. And I knew the women from that generation were doing the same. So we championed each other as a network and a sisterhood. But over the years, over the last 20 years, there have been different business networks, business associations. There was Business Women's Association, still is there. There's the African Women Chartered Association for South Africa, and various other networks, including International Women's Forum of South Africa, where women at different stages of their careers or their professional lives find networks to link to and lean into, and also make sure that you find people you can share common experiences and also learn in a safe space as you work together. So your sponsors may not necessarily be within the same organization that you are part of. They may be sitting outside, because I think about it as your board of directors.
Yes.
At the end of the day, a personal board of directors, people that will think about and say, you know, if I'm looking for advice at a personal level, I know who to talk to. If I'm looking for advice at a spiritual level, I know who are the people that I can talk to. If it's professional, these are the people I can talk to. Because not a single person can be able to satisfy all your needs at the same time. And I think sometimes where we are hard on ourselves as women is the fact that, you know, because we have got this connection in relationship professionally, I'm expecting you now to deal with my needs now today, when you may be dealing with your own issues.
Yes.
And if I don't have a broader network of other people that I'm able to lean into without expecting you to fulfill my needs now, then I'm going to be much more understanding. That's why I seek first to understand, to be understood. It's important. You may not be having a good week or month and may not be telling me, and I may be thinking that, well, Viwe is completely off, whereas there are other issues that you're preoccupied with. So we have to be open to the fact that women, I don't believe there's any woman who sits there and say, I want to be the only woman sitting here, because not only does it make sense, it's very lonely. It's very lonely being there by yourself.
Yes.
It's not fun. It's tiring, because as a change agent, when you come into any environment, you want to come in there as a professional and have to deal lesser and lesser with the issues of change and transformation. And hopefully the more visibility you have of people like you, like yourself, who sound like you, who look like you, the less you focus on those issues, but more on issues that are the substance of the job that needs to be done. So women supporting each other, the sisterhood, and also creating the networks, and also the sense of openness of knowing that, you know, I can talk to someone or get someone to refer me to somebody else who can be able to support me and give me some advice, is something that we need to conscientize ourselves on. We don't do enough of that. I must say, as women, we don't. And it's something that I believe we should be doing more of, where we lean into the other networks that are there of other women.
Yeah. As we come into a close, Ms Nolitha, you've led companies locally and abroad. You have chaired boards. You've been a change agent. You've been a voice. You know, you've been a transformation agent in many respects. A very respected leader in our country, in Africa, and in the world, arguably. What, in your view, would take for us as a nation, given our context, where our ethics are, the level of corruption, the kind of leadership we have, and where we are as a country, what would it take to raise another Nolitha and another Lita, just by the way? Those kind of leaders, young leaders, what would it take for us to inculcate the values that you've left behind?
Sure, I would hate to be thought of as an exception. That's definitely not the case. That's why. But thank you for being generous in your recognition. Because I know of a lot of fantastic women from my generation before me, and also the younger generation who are doing amazing things in the world, who are amazing ethical leaders wherever they are. So there are lots of us, probably not everyone is visible to society the way that probably some of us have got visibility. Hence, it's important to be part of the networks because there you meet other women that you say, wow, they're doing so much good work in the fashion industry, in the arts and culture environment, in sports. You know, you meet women who do really amazing things. And that, for me, has been one of the lessons that I have learned just engaging with people. It's knowing that that the sisterhood just is not only about within your own organization, it's looking at every woman you come across as a woman who's representing you. You see yourself in that woman and see the potential that somebody saw in you and are able to open opportunities for them. In terms of leadership, we definitely, as a country, as a continent, and globally, are challenged as leaders around finding leaders who continue to lead with ethics, who continue to lead with integrity. And as I had explained, integrity is also about consistency. You know, and when we think about geopolitics and global politics, leaders, because political leaders tend to have more visibility than others, and therefore people say, oh, leadership is wanting. Like because of that lack of consistency, because politicians, their time frame is much more shorter than for other leaders. For them, it's about the next election. For us in business and in other institutions, it's about the next 10 years, next 20 years that you want to be around. And having said that, it's important then that we hold each other accountable to delivering for the interest of the greater good and supporting each other. And leaders, wherever they are and wherever we are, we open up opportunities to change the system rather than change for an individual. So when we are at a global leadership level or a country level leadership, you are talking about changing a system, an organization, or a country or a department, rather than wanting to change for that one person or for that one community. You have to be thinking much more strategically in how it is we can be able to collaborate with all partners, stakeholders that are there, how we are able to partner with different people from civil society, from labor, from business and government, to be able to deliver for in the interest of society, because you can't have a thriving business environment in an environment where politically and socially it's not stable, and vice versa. So the partnerships for me are important, the collaborations, the ability to talk to each other and have frank, courageous conversations, because these conversations are not easy, are not easy. But if people understand that you are coming from a place where you are not being judgmental, but rather we are there to be part of the solution, then you find that there's more openness to engaging rather than people being defensive because now you are not seen to be supportive. So it's important as leaders, we partner, we collaborate within the African continent. We've got a lot of opportunities. Let's leverage those for the benefit of the continent. Because when you go to Europe, the European Union does the same, the US does the same, China does the same. It's important, therefore, that we find the common themes that will help all of us develop our economies and our countries and our businesses to be global standards by collaboration, partnerships, and working with all stakeholders.
Ms Nolitha, I must thank you. We do have a lot to talk about when it comes to the book, but I must really thank you for passing on the knowledge to the next generation, for codifying your experiences into this book, and also letting us in to your life as a leader in South Africa, in corporate and sitting in various boards, as I've mentioned before. Your parting shot before we say goodbye to our e-loungers?
Well, one, to say thank you very much for opening this platform to me to have this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. You've made me think more about what we can do better and differently. And two, to congratulate you for taking this initiative, because we have to really be a learning country, learning organization, use best practices, and more importantly, to share our stories and document our stories. So book clubs are important, that we document the journeys that we have, because we don't want the next generation to repeat the mistakes of our past.
Yes.
And we want people to work and improve on what we did. And also, more importantly, for us to learn from each other. So thank you very much for
Thank you so much, Ms Nolitha. And thank you for all our e-loungers for joining us. Thank you to our publishers and sponsors, and also the leadership of the Gautrain management agencies for making this possible. This is a knowledge share platform aimed at anchoring us as the GMA as a learning organization. Thank you very much.